I'd like to welcome up for our session here on intercity travel, the moderator, Kome Ajise, who is the executive director of SCAG, who is bringing up his panels. Yeah, there we go. He brought his own entourage to this. That's a baller move. I appreciate it. Come on up.
Thank you. Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Who fed them? Good afternoon, everybody. We have a really short session today because it's the closing session of this event. And I want to make sure we spend all the time hearing what these two people have to say, these two august guests that we have. First of all, I have Stephanie Wiggins. Stephanie is the I guess I'm going to have to sit here. Stephanie is a CEO of Metrolink, and she was named the CEO of Metrolink in December of 2018. And she has a staff of about 275 employees and runs a budget of almost 800 million. Joining Stephanie with me is Pierre Gosset. Pierre is the Chief Technology Officer at SYSTRA. He comes to us from France. And he's not even jet lagged. He's only been here a couple of days. I'm taking absolutely no time to tell you about these folks because we don't have time to spend too much on their bios. You can always look them up, I imagine. Well, as you've heard, my name is Kome Ajise. I'm your moderator today, and I'm the executive director of SCAG, and we're proud to be co-sponsors or proud sponsors of CoMotion LA, and we have been honored to be part of this conference for a few years now. I want to take a moment to thank John Rosson and Tim Gribardi, and just thank them. Again, I want you to appreciate them because this is an excellent event, and it gets better every year. How about a hand for those two? Well, LA CoMotion is a great place to meet technology companies. It's a great place for us, groupies of transportation, to come together. We see startups here. And more and more, it's a place to share ideas and pick up new ideas that we hope will help us advance the future of mobility across various, many of our jurisdictions. Including in our panel discussion today, we want to talk about the future of rail, I think Hyperloop, intercity travel. It's really the future of how we move the masses. And so with that, I want to start with a question to Stephanie. And my question is, we are in the middle of a lot of technology out there, Stephanie. What is an emerging technology that you're most excited about, that you've seen out there or in general?
Wow, well, thank you, Kome, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm really excited about the technology out here that relates to first mile, last mile, because for our commuter rail system, one of my biggest challenges in attracting more people to choose to take our service is how do they finish their trip? And seeing the micromobility, the scooters, and the diversity of opportunities there really gets me excited about finally having a solution to close that gap. And why I think that is so important is when I think about our climate and the environment and recognizing that on Metrolink, the average trip is 36 miles one way. So last year, we reduced more than 300 million vehicle miles traveled because about 90% of our riders have a car. And they left that car at home and they decided to get on the train. And we need more people to make that choice. But one of the biggest barriers to getting more people to ride the train is the first mile, last mile. So I'm really excited to see all the variety of the technology and how it's growing in terms of the scooters.
So Pierre, have you tried one of the scooters? Are you excited about any of the technologies out there?
I tried.
So
I came from Paris to try this.
Now that's funny. So from your perspective, Pierre, what's the most exciting emerging technology that you see out there, either here or that you know of, because I know you have more of a global perspective to things?
Yeah, thank you, Kome. Hello, everyone. My name is Pierre, and I'm the CTO of SYSTRA. And in SYSTRA, we are dealing with engineering services and consulting on the transportation and mobility. And we have the chance to get exposed to a lot of projects in the world. And we got some good example of, I would say, improvement in the railway, which are really promising. Remember, in the 90s, we started to see some automation in the metro. And now automation in the metro is becoming very, I would say, traditional way to develop some metro on some places of the world. Not necessarily yet in the US, because you are not, I would say, a rail country, but it's coming. But here and there, we are getting the level of automation which is gradually increased day after day. And this is not only true for metro, but this is true as well for light rail and bus, and this is coming for rail as well. And I guess that this automation for rail will improve the customer experience. And what we try to do in order to move the people out of their car, in order to get on the transport public, this is to make sure that the rail is something with a real customer experience. With some new technologies, we may think about the new telecom 5G standards will improve the type of communication or services on board the trains. We'll have a better vehicle to infrastructure interfaces in order to improve the condition of each of the journey using trains. So I think that one of the future of the trains is the train itself, with improved functionality, with improved, I would say, level of safety and probably of automation. And I do agree with Stephanie. I think that the type of first and last mile, but more globally, the type of network integration we can find in order to have seamless journey from A to B, from your home, for instance, to your work, is very much important. So we need not only technology, but we need governance in order to improve that type of seamless journey from A to B.
So how many of you are from the 6-county area within SCAG? How many around here know? And the reason I ask is because I'm going to ask Stephanie the next question, because then you know Metrolink. How many of you are familiar with Metrolink? Oh, excellent.
Yay.
There you go. You got customers here. So Pierre talked about integration and the customer experience, because I think that's sort of the thread between both of your responses is ultimately is about the person using the technology, not the technology, and what that experience is. From your perspective, Stephanie, as you think of Metrolink's services, what's your concerns in terms of integration, or what are you thinking in terms of what more work you need to do for integration?
Well, we have prioritized the customer experience and focusing on the customer first and foremost in all of our decision making. And as Pierre said, I believe that automation and simplification is the key to really providing outstanding customer experience. Part of our challenge, at least from a government perspective, we need more Pierres, because on the government side, my whole career has been in the public sector. We really have trouble with adapting with new technologies. We tend to be too prescriptive, and we tend to be very risk averse. So by the time we figure out what we want to do and put it out on the street for proposers, the technology is out of date. It doesn't really address the customer problem that we're trying to address. So we need to be more innovative. That's really one of the challenges. You talked about governance, Pierre. One of our challenges is working in the public realm and allowing failure to be seen as a positive thing, so we try out new ideas. In terms of the network integration, one of our challenges is that a lot of the stakeholders or companies that we deal with, whether they're on the public or the private side, they're very siloed, and they don't want to share information. And what they don't realize is for a service like Metrolink, where 60% of our riders are traveling from one county to another county on every trip, they don't want to be bothered with those types of boundaries and restrictions and constraints. And yet that's how government agencies really run and plan their work. So that's my biggest challenge, is how we open up, how we truly develop network integration that is seamless and automated, and yet still preserves everyone's interest in making sure that we're stewards of the taxpayer's dollar.
Yeah, that's very valid in terms of integration, physical integration, and you mentioned as well the type of information that needs to flow from, I would say, one body to the other. So you are referring to the integration of the data as well, and the way we are making sure that one trip for one, I would say, traveler is very seamless from A to B. In terms of, for instance, ticketing system. In ticketing system, when you are in Paris, that's a nightmare because you've got several regulations, and in order to take I would say, a ticket, that's very difficult. On some other place of the world, everything is digitized, and you've got only your smartphone, and you're getting there very seamlessly. And this is the type of, I would say, progress that the technology now is mature enough in order to develop that, but this is about cooperation. Not only cooperation between the supply chain and the transport authority, but from transport authority to other transport authority. And sometimes this is a bit of a challenge to address and to align everything in order to develop this.
Yeah, big time. My wish is that we could operate more seamlessly like the airlines. If you have a trip on an airline and they cancel your flight, they send you a text message and they send you an email and saying, these are the next few flights and we can book you. We don't do that for transit, right? We just say, hey, train's not coming, call Uber or Lyft. Yeah. That is not sustainable. That's not outstanding customer service and experience, right?
I agree.
It's amazing to reduce that anxiety. Technology and integration can really reduce that customer anxiety by giving them better information when there's a disruption on the service.
Agree.
So from your experience, Pierre, what have you seen in other places in terms of ticketing? Because obviously, wherever you go, there's multi-jurisdictional division of labor in terms of transit service provision, whether it's a metro or subway or more regional rail. Different organizations do that, yet there's one person trying to cross all those lines. What's the best practices that you've seen out there?
I would not say best practices, but there are some, I would say, places in the world, they manage to get a new system quite late, in fact, in their journey in terms of public transport. If you compare, for instance, Paris, we got a metro for now more than a century. The metro in itself is, I would say, very good, but at the same time, we got some weaknesses. And we were an early adopter of this. So we managed to get the legacy system and the richness of those systems very difficult to address. Some other cities, for instance, in the Middle East, they started from scratch with some technology which were, I would say, up to date, and they managed to create this transversality in terms of system very easily. So I would say that this is not necessarily a best practice, but because they were, I would say, adopters in the just in 10 years from now, they have been able to develop their system, which is much more advanced compared to old city. However, there are some old metro, like in London, where the capability to move from one place to the other, from one operator to the other, is very seamless for the operator. You just get your credit card, tap in, tap out, and that's it. So this is not the type of philosophy which are everywhere positioned.
But is that London model, is that sustainable? You see that it's in terms of places where you have legacy systems like Paris, New York, is that the future of seamlessness in using systems with your credit card?
I think I'd like to pick up one concept which has been, I would say, proposed by Jan Lerich. Jan Lerich is the Transdev CEO for North America, and he's a specialist of autonomous vehicle. And he said, when you are talking about autonomous vehicle, you need to think trust. What does that mean, trust? Trust means technology, means rules, means usage, means system and data, and means technology in the end. Territories, technology. Every case is a specific case. So the same technology will not apply the same way everywhere. every transit authority, they got a problem which is specific to solve. There is not one size fits all. So we need to take into consideration this level of complexity in order to address the very different problem. So a good practices in Dubai is not necessarily replicable for Stephanie, and vice versa. So each time we need to, and maybe this is where the challenge is, and this is where I'm so amazed to work on this railway sector, because this is very complex, because you have to address the situation on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, so I want to talk about the future of moving the masses, because
yes.
in our region, most people travel alone in their cars. 72% of our commuters drive alone. It's obscene. But that's what we have because we were built around the freeway system. I'd rather most of them jump on Metrolink because, as Stephanie's proven in her case, they can own a car and still take the train because, in this case, the train offers a better option than sitting in traffic for 2 hours one direction. And so when we talk about rail, we're talking about a technology that's been with us for more than a century. And so there's this sense that maybe we're working off of a really old horse and we need to change horses. What is the future? I know the topic mentions Hyperloop. Where does that fit in the conversations we have? We've had conversations with folks at Hyperloop, and there is some exciting projects that they're working on around the globe. What is that? Just briefly, what does that look like? And then I want to ask Stephanie a follow-up question.
That's exciting, for sure. Hyperloop is still in its building phase, so they are not yet capable to demonstrate a level of performance, but for sure, that's amazing. And I got to confess something. In my body, we are two. I've got the French engineer, which is in his 50-ish, with some safety cases in his head, with the management of degraded mode. But as well, there's a guy, which is 10 years old, who read, I would say, Around the World in 80 Days from Jules Verne at that time. And I say, wow, that's fantastic. So the young boy inside to me say, that's fantastic. And the old engineer say, still a bit of a job in order to get this. So I don't know which one of them I am right now, maybe both of them, and I say, okay, that's fantastic. We need to push all together in order to get this idea or the other idea, in order to get the future of transportation here and there. Note, this is not for tomorrow morning. My understanding of the maturity of those technology, still, they need to demonstrate a few things with regard to safety, with regard to degraded mode management. So for sure, we need to encourage and we need to work on this. Is that for tomorrow morning? Not that sure. And that's the reason why I'm a strong believer and supporter of the rail. The rail is something which is quite basic, quite traditional, quite efficient, very clean, and we need to push as well. So I'm supporting the investment in the new ideas like Hyperloop. I'm also supporting, I'm a supporter of the idea that in the rail, there are still room of maneuver in order to improve the services.
So I appreciate that, because I think sometimes when we talk about Hyperloop, it's almost as if we want to move on from rail, yet as Stephanie's proven in her case, absolutely do need rail today. Then the question to you, Stephanie, is what's the future of that rail technology? Knowing that Hyperloop is still out there, it's a potential, it would fill its niche when it's ready, and it might replace rail, we don't know just yet. But in the meantime, we got to commute today from the Inland Empire into LA, for example, and it's going to be on steel wheels. What's the future of steel wheels for you?
Well, I think the future is bright because, as Pierre said, rail is reliable, and I'm not aware of any technology today that can carry 700 people on one trip like our trains do every day, right? That mass transportation vehicle is what we get from conventional rail. So the future, though, of commuter rail has to be zero emission, right? Again, to support the work that you're doing, the important work that you're doing with SCAG to ensure air quality conformity, we really have to advance the technology with conventional rail in terms of emissions. And so I'm excited about the various emission technologies that are out there. San Bernardino County just announced yesterday they signed an agreement with Stadler. They're looking at a hydrogen fuel cell rail propulsion unit. We know others are looking at battery electric locomotives, but we've got to get to zero emission, and I'm proud that we've joined Lacey to focus on getting to zero emission by the Olympics in 2028. Shout out for Lacey.
And that's very true, because Hyperloop is one technology which is a bit futuristic. We need to save the planet for the next 10 years. So we got only 10 years in order to save the planet. So the more we are capable to address this dramatic shift and to address the quality of the air right now, the better it is. So I'm for sure enthusiastic about new technology, but the challenge is right now.
Okay. So I want to provide some room for audience participation. I imagine you all have questions. No? No questions? Oh, thank you very much. We'll move on to now. Are there any questions from the audience? Because obviously you're here because you're interested. Over here.
You need to take a
Hang on.
mic.
We need a mic.
Hello? Okay. So you guys mentioned the Metrolink and to getting to place and the less usage of cars, since people who drive them is just a single rider, you know? Has there been any talk about micromobility, like maybe improving street conditions, maybe adding bike lanes to, let's say, people who live within the city to get to work without having to use their cars?
Oh, that's an excellent question. You want to?
Sure, absolutely. LADOT, I think they might have a booth out here. Metro has a couple of booths here at CoMotion that are actually looking at just that, because about half of the trips that we make are short trips that really can be addressed with micromobility. One of the major challenges, though, as you've identified, the condition of the sidewalks. We need protected bike lanes. I just think it's primarily men who feel like warriors and are going to brave the city streets on their bikes. But if you want
I resemble that remark.
if you want, mothers with young children, I mean, a protected bike lane just makes you feel much more secure and much more open and accessible to people than not. So LADOT is a critical part of making that happen.
Well, I'm not a panelist, but I'll add to this, because I think we're doing some work at SCAG on short trips. And if you go outside, just right out to the left over here, you'll see a setup called Go Human. It's really intended to demonstrate how we can implement active transportation infrastructure to take care of those short trips and improve the curbside for people to actually have to travel without using a car. So there's a lot of work going on across the region on that. But for people that need to make those short trips, they're probably not going to be on any of these trains, but they may need to make those short trips to get to the train station. So that's where micromobility comes into play.
And I think there is no silver bullet, there is no unique solution. This is a combination of several, I would say, solutions. We need to have an ecosystem of sustainable solution, which is a blend of, I would say, traditional existing solution and maybe new solution. We are not going to solve the problem of moving the masses with a unique silver bullet. So this is this combination and this ecosystem which is worth thinking and worth implementing here and there.
Thank you. Any other questions?
My question is real quickly for Ms. Wiggins. When thinking about double tracking, or I'm sorry, dedicated lines, rail lines, I think that has maybe been an issue for Metrolink in the past. Maybe it still is. Is there any plans to sort of change that? And secondly, any plans to extend out into the Coachella Valley?
Thank you. So you've hit on two great questions and great opportunities for us. So one of the challenges in growing the Metrolink system and having even more riders, despite us removing over 9 million car trips from the road last year, is the fact that about 40% of our network is only single track. And that's a bottleneck. Imagine when you're driving on the highway and the roadway and there's only one lane in each direction. So you understand that bottleneck and you can't pass. So we have put together a $10 billion program called SCORE. That's a Southern California Optimized Rail Expansion Program. And it's our capital program to really build more capacity, double track, triple track in some instances, grade separations, in time for the Olympics, thus the acronym SCORE. But we've been fortunate. We got about $1 billion down payment from the state about almost 2 years ago. We're continuing to lobby the state and federal government as well as our private sector partners to help us accomplish that. But that's really our future. We need that capacity. And Riverside County is right now exploring the potential of a ballot initiative for 2020. And they asked the community what would they like to see. And rail to Coachella Valley was #1. So we're excited to help inform the public as the Transportation Commission in Riverside County contemplates whether or not they're going to put an expenditure plan on the ballot. But there's definitely a desire. There are some challenges associated with getting to Coachella Valley, but I think that has to be our future.
Yeah, I just want to also follow up on that, just because you're so knowledgeable. Can you, and this also
We need
about
the mic.
New York City.
We need the mic.
Just to follow up, and since you are the person who probably knows more about this than anybody, and since it's also about Intercity, can you give us an update on what's happening with the potential connections between the the California High-Speed Rail project coming down, hopefully through a tunnel or whatever, but into the Union Station area where it's being redone and to connect, and that will also help Metrolink, as I understand it. Could you just explain what that's all about? Thank you.
That's a loaded question.
I can't answer, by the way.
Actually, I was just in a hearing earlier this week that the Assembly Transportation Committee had put on about high-speed rail. So, as many of you know, there was a ballot initiative passed in 2008 to really try to advance high-speed rail statewide, San Francisco to San Diego. Basically, phase 1 includes Los Angeles to Anaheim. However, there's not enough funding. The governor has identified the Central Valley as the first place to start. The CEO of the High Speed Rail Authority would really like that segment to be Merced to Bakersfield. So they're working with the legislature right now to find funding. However, High Speed Rail, to your point, has identified that Metrolink and operating in a blended system with Metrolink is the key to success. And that's why the High Speed Rail has invested about $400 million in Union Station as part of that transformative project that LA Metro is leading. And that's core for Metrolink's business because 6 of our 7 rail lines terminate at Union Station. So that's critical for our future. But, you know, we feel that it's very important given that right now between Burbank to Anaheim, which is part of the high-speed rail route for phase 1, the Burbank to Anaheim corridor today, just with Metrolink service, carries almost 2 million people annually. So we are providing a great feeder network to the greater high-speed rail. So we're excited to partner with them as they look for opportunities to continue to attract funds so that we can accelerate high-speed rail here. But there also has been recently the entrance of a private entity, Virgin Trains, that has purchased the rights to build high-speed rail from Vegas to Victorville. And their hope is to get to Los Angeles through Palmdale. So there are lots of exciting opportunities for high-speed rail. Kome, you want to add anything?
Well, yeah. Nice setup. I know too much. I better move on. Any other questions out there?
Hi, good afternoon. Question both for Stephanie and Pierre. As different entities and organizations looks at things like climate change, wildfires, what are some of the things you are looking into building in resilience into your assets and making sure that doesn't impact ridership? Because if I would see that if it's too hot, I would be hard pressed to walk to take a public transportation as opposed to getting into my air-conditioned car directly from my homes, and then protecting your assets, right? Because heat has an impact on tracks and other things. So what are some of the forward-looking things you're doing?
Let's start with Pierre, and then real quickly, because we're running out of time, and then we'll come to Stephanie.
Yeah. So that's really a big thing in terms of engineering, and we are, I would say, obliged to think about typical solutions, typical engineering solution in order to de-risk and to have some resilience on the infrastructure. So for every type of climate change, we are to implement, for instance, we are working as of now for the second stretch of the high speed in the UK from London to Birmingham, and the type of design we are implementing is very much different from the first stretch from Paris to London, due to the subject that you are imposing, if you are putting on the table. So this is something we are doing. The type of thinking around that is just emerging. So we don't have, I would say, a strong database in order to really understand what type of resilience at design level we should implement. But this is really something we are considering.
Stephanie?
We agree. We were fortunate to just receive a $500,000 grant from Caltrans for a climate adaptation resiliency grant. So we'll be going out to the private sector and asking to retain a consultant to help us get those answers.
So we're out of time. If I just have you spend about 30 seconds just closing out your thoughts on this topic.
I think LA CoMotion is the place to be in order to think about the future and to together make sure that we are collectively managing I would say this next step of improvement, not only for the rail but for the rest of the system. And my final word, this is about integration and system integration. This is very important in order to make sure that this ecosystem of sustainable solution fits with the customer experience and the efficiency of the public transport.
I would just close by saying the future is now at Metrolink. We're delighted to have CoMotion here because we want the private sector to know that Metrolink is interested today in getting those innovative ideas and partnerships so we can be more relevant and provide outstanding customer experience in the future.
Excellent. So you've heard from these two excellent panelists. Sounds like the future of moving the masses is still about rail, but better rail, cleaner rail. And we heard a lot about integration and the customer experience. So there's a lot of consideration for that. I would really ask you, if you don't mind, to appreciate this too for me. Thank you.